Together, we're going to be going through this afternoon one of the tools that we hope, if you've not already deployed it, that you look at deploying in your network. This is a sinkhole tool. It's a technique that ISPs, various ISPs have been deploying and using for all sorts of different security purposes on the net. This is part of a series that we've been doing, kind of like an annual series where we take real-world ISP security techniques and tools that you can, basically deploy with any, vendor's equipment. We keep it as neutral as possible. It's more of techniques. So the first one where Chris, Brian, and I did with the UUNet backscatter traceback technique and all the techniques along with that. And then last year, Kevin Howell and I did with the CPE protection because of all the CPE break-ins we're seeing with different routers. And so now we're going to do sinkholes for this one. So the objective of all these tutorials is to communicate, real-world practices. So these are things coming from you and Danny and I in kind of our position working with different providers in ISP security space. We can gain from our peers kind of like, oh, here's what we're doing at this provider, here's what we're doing at that provider, and they permit us to kind of generalize it and express it here so others can copy what they're doing without knowing exactly what they're doing or exactly who did this, so we don't give away any specific details. So here we're trying to get everybody in sync with the sinkhole technique. So what are sinkholes? Sinkholes are kind of like, you can consider it equivalent as a network equivalent of a honeypot. It's basically a sectioning network that sucks down bad packets, and then when you take those bad packets and you do things with them. You can analyze it. You can go through and look at what sort of backscatter is coming from it. You can look at attacks in progress. You can take an attack that's hitting one of your customers that's maybe stressing out an aggregation router and redirect it to the sinkhole and do your classification and mitigation technique off the sinkhole. So it's kind of like a multi-purpose tool, which is where we get this Swiss Army knife expression for it, because we're finding our peers are coming up and saying, hey, we found this new idea that we can do with a sinkhole. Hey, we found this other idea we can do with a sinkhole. So once people deployed it, they're finding more and more different types of uses for it. They're situational, sometimes to their network, or sometimes can apply to everyone. And the ones who are applied to everyone, we try to apply here in this presentation. So give like a general scenario. This is what some of the providers do with it. You get an aggregation router, and you got like, think of a router with 1,000 customers sitting there. And you got, one customer's getting DOSed. Take like, T1 customer is getting DOSed at 45 megabits of traffic. Well, guess what? At 45 megabits of traffic going down that T1, it's going to be dropped somewhere. Where's it going to get dropped? It's going to get dropped on the aggregation router. And here you got to go on that router and kind of do something on that router. Well, do you want to really do something on that router where, many other customers on there and put them at risk? Because anytime you go log into a router, you're dropping lots of traffic, the router could be under stress, and you want to shove it off there. So what you do with the sinkhole is you take the /32 that's being hit, and you advertise it on the sinkhole. Or a specific prefix says, come over here. It could be a /24 going to customer. You take 32, goes into the sinkhole. Now you got the traffic going off to the side to a part of your network that's designed to look at traffic. And you can now go through and throw up a classification ACL, load up a sniffer on it, load TCP dump on it, do things like that on it, and kind of process and do things off to the side. You don't have to worry about the rest of your customers. Now, the customer who's being hit here, well, you'll say, well, I just DOSed him because I took the /32 off to the side. But think about it, the guy's getting hit with 45 megs of traffic, he's DOSed anyways. But if it's one web server getting hit on a T1, pull that 45 megabits off to the side, guess what? You just restored partial service to the guy because the rest of his address space is now working. The /32 is being hit, so the /32 is now DOSed, but the rest of the /24, if he had a /24, is not DOSed. So he can send you email then. He's got his other services up there. Restored partial connectivity. DOS is still in action, but here you're not jeopardizing your other customers. You got more tools available to you. You can't run a sniffer on a router. You can take it over a sinkhole. You can run a sniffer on the traffic and see what's going on. There's a lot more tools to it. So this is kind of the general purpose of the sinkhole. Where you're pulling traffic away is one of the techniques for doing it. This is, you got several providers out there who actually do this now in this mode, which is kind of like where you have one sinkhole in the Anycast mode, and then in another mode. Other things that people are using it for is watch for network scans. You can advertise dark IP space, failed attacks, backscatter. We'll go through these details as we go through. All sorts of different junk out there that you can dump off into the sinkhole. Placement, we'll talk, a little bit more about the placement of it. Many people start with just putting one sinkhole out there on their network. After time, many of them are now moving towards an Anycast model on sinkholes, and we'll go through a section. We'll talk about how an Anycast model kind of works with that path. But primarily, if you go with one sinkhole, you kind of want it in a centralized place in your network, in a place in your network that's not going to be, overloaded if all of a sudden you shove a bunch of DOS traffic at it. So, so some of the guys that put their sinkholes in the middle of networks, put some on some hefty routers on them. Others got workstations spread all over the network in the Anycast. So it's many different techniques you can use on this. And the multiple sinkhole configuration, this is where you can take the Anycast technique. We're going to walk through the Anycast technique, how that works and how different providers are using Anycast sinkholes. So you can deploy the sinkholes widely across your network without having to move circuits all over the place. It's expensive. So why go through this and why go through this now? Well, they work. We got guys out there using them quite effectively. If those of you who are security people who work on security work and you're on the NSPSec list, you will see people say, hey, I just dropped this attack into a sinkhole. So you see actual big providers out there and they'll say, yeah, this attack I black hole or this other attack I dropped it down to my sinkhole and here's the TCP dump off of the attack. That sort of stuff. So you see people actively use these live attack sinkholes. And more users are being found, but the key thing is they take preparation. Sinkholes are not something that you can wait and rip up, which is the key thing why we're bringing this up now. What we find is sinkholes is a very powerful tool for turbo worm mitigation. And turbo worms, as we saw with Slammer, are not something that, I got a new turbo worm, let me go prepare my tools. Well, guess what? Too late. We got a worm that propagates around the planet, in 10 to 15 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes is just time to wake up, log into your computer and realize that, oh my God, something's going on, let alone trying to come up with tools and techniques and deploy a sinkhole. These are things that you have to deploy beforehand. And we're finding the sinkholes are very powerful as after you contain the worm, you track down and start plugging up all the affected machines. So just to give some clarification of why we call this a sinkhole, because some people have come up and said, why are you calling this a sinkhole? Isn't this a tar pit? Isn't this just a black hole server? The black hole routers, right, we use those to advertise address space. They weren't really security in function. They're a routing function. They're a placeholder to put your aggregate announcements, drop them in L0. I can place them in many parts of the network. They weren't really built as a security tool. So a sinkhole goes beyond that. You can use a sinkhole in the function of the black hole router. We're going to talk about that. Tarpits are places in enterprise networks where you take and slow down connections and things like that. Well, you can put a sinkhole in a tarpit, but a tarpit in itself is not a sinkhole. Shunts, where you take and redirect the traffic directly on the router off of the interface. You can put a sinkhole, and that can be a shunt, but a shunt can be many other things in itself. And the same thing with Honeynets. Honeynet has a specific role. You can put a Honeynet in a sinkhole, but a sinkhole is not necessarily a Honeynet. So sinkhole is a much broader term. You can have all these things inside the sinkhole. You can just throw all sorts of things in. So that's what we call a Swiss Army knife sort of tool. So now I'm going to hand over to Danny. Danny's going to go through some of the router basics and some of the ramifications of black hole routers. And by the way, anytime if you want to ask a question, please just come up to the mic. The front mic is the one that's working. And just to kind of introduce yourself since we got this on tape. So how many people in here have actually heard of sinkholes before this meeting? How many actually have them deployed? You find value in those, I guess. So that's not a large number. So that's kind of the goal. So I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes about basics of sinkholes and some of the issues with these scalers. Alright, so a basic sinkhole doesn't have to be complicated. I mean, it can be a workstation off of an Ethernet segment that you statically route packets to. You don't even need to run routing code on it for that matter. For Unix, Linux,
is, you know, how much traffic do you send to that sinkhole, and you should be really careful because you can easily saturate the capacity either of a system or of a link for a sinkhole. So to understand how much traffic you've actually got in prefixes you want to monitor is something you should be aware of. One of the things as well is that you don't want routers generating tons of unreachable messages, that sort of thing, if a host goes down. So you could put a static ARP on it, you know, kind of like a shunt, I guess. Put a static ARP entry on a router to get rid of you know, the unreachable stuff, that kind of thing. If your box goes down, you can still forward the traffic on the LAN and it doesn't impact anything or send a lot of garbage back out onto the network. So, all right, what to monitor in a sinkhole? Dark IP. So dark IP is kind of you know, I guess a pretty broad term, and the common definition for that, I guess, if there is one, is, you know, is bogon space, RFC 1918 kind of stuff. Unallocated address space from your own network that either hasn't been allocated or you know, isn't used, or you know, the RFC 1918, those sorts of things. And you know, what you can do by, you know, by watching this address space, now you should be really careful because, you know, again, the amount of data that comes to this address space is more than most people expect. So so you should be aware of, you know, of how much you're going to monitor, and start small, either with, you know, unallocated backbone or infrastructure links, that sort of thing, or unallocated customer prefixes, or you know, or just, you know, one of the RFC 1918 prefixes, that sort of thing. So you can monitor, again, you can monitor backscatter, you know, backscatter from attacks. I want to talk about what backscatter is in just a moment if you're not aware. Dark IP stuff, you know, who's scanning. So just by putting one IP address there, I mean, I have one IP address on one of my home subnets that I monitor, and it's amazing actually how many scans you see a day, just, you know, random scans, and you know, they're probably compromised hosts that are scanning looking for some exploit, right? So you can get a handle on those things. So. All right, so monitor scan rates is, you know, there are lots of tools to do this. I work for Arbor, and you know, our company has a tool that does some of this, but there's a ton of stuff out there that's free that does this as well. And you know, to get something in place and free, and start with your small sinkhole and actually understand what's going on your network, and you know, get an idea about what's happening is kind of the you know, the goal here. I guess that's what we're trying to get across, is to, you know, be prepared and understand what's happening on your network. So. Okay, so this is actually a screenshot from some of our stuff. When a worm actually, and it shows a list of infected hosts down at the bottom, and you can actually see a huge spike there. And this was from a sinkhole. And if you're monitoring this, you can say, "Whoa, look at that! You know, the average rate, you know, above what I expected for this interface or this device or this prefix went up." And you know, here's a list of all the hosts that were scanning this prefix. So they're probably all compromised, or you know, they've been infected by this worm or whatever it was that happened. You can actually figure it out versus just assuming that there's a bunch of noise on your network that day, and you know, and discarding it because it will grow. So. All right, monitoring backscatter. So let me actually, here we go. So let me talk about backscatter real quick first. So what you see here is, this is, you know, I don't know where the term backscatter actually came from. I'm guessing that, you know, Kata used it first. I don't know if it came from elsewhere, but it's what you see in this example actually is a couple of packets with spoof source addresses here. And so they're hitting some victim. In this case, this is the victim, and then the victim's replying back to, you know, B, D, and C in this case, and that's what's, you know, that's somewhat referred to as backscatter. It can also come from, you know, router unreachable messages, or you know, a number of things, and that's the backscatter that we're talking about. So if you can get a handle on you know, where that data is going back to, and watch that, you can get a good idea about, you know, what's happening. So.
Is this on?
Yeah, you got to talk.
Okay. One of the things when you put backscatter inside your network is, and you only monitor, say, like, you know, say if you take your router, your sinkholes, and you put your all your you use it as your black hole generators for your route advertisements. So you take all your CIDR aggregate blocks and you stick them on your sinkholes, and then you can watch the backscatter. And one of the providers, this is how they kind of get an early indication of which of the customers being attacked, because they see only the backscatter from their network, you know, from all the networks that provide to them, and that will give them an indication, okay, which of my customers are getting hit, which customer is getting ready to call me, and this one guy said that, you know, it's really fun sometimes to have the customer call, be escalated to him, and says, "Oh yes, hey, how you doing? I understand you're under attack right now. I can see it on my monitor right now. Let's go ahead and plug this up." You know, it helps you get in more proactive mode with your customers that way. So backscatter is pretty nice tool internally if you set it up.
Yeah, we actually have a couple of examples on how you do that with your aggregates in a moment. Your network aggregates. Anyway, that was the CADA stuff. You can go there and look at some of the analysis and some of the other things they did on Backscatter. It's actually pretty interesting. And the Backscatter, the traceback stuff that Chris and Rob and I guess Brian Gimberling and a few other folks from WorldCom and elsewhere did, and they presented. I think the Toronto Nanog is still online. So if you want to go back and have a look at that, if it makes more sense now, that's something you ought to do. It's pretty cool as well. So. Monitoring spoof ranges. Okay, so this is just a sample of of an accounting via packet filter that's looking at some address ranges, right? So this is pretty.
Yeah, this is Jeff went out one time. This was actually cut and paste from a nano discussion, where there was a nano discussion about how many spoofed addresses in Bogon space are there really out there. And this is like packets. So he had some router somewhere in the network, and he just did a classification ACL, which was all permits and all denies. And this was his denied case. And he just, this is all source addresses out of the Bogon space. And he just said, okay, how many's out there? Threw it out there and just look at counters. And he was like surprised over his network that there were that many spoofed Bogon addresses out there on his network. He didn't think there was any.
By the way, Barry did most of these slides and gave them to me about an hour and a half ago. So if it seems like he knows some of them better than I do, then that's probably why. So, all right. So right there. Okay. So now I'm to sinkholes and internet facing and what this actually looks like. And what you see here is okay. So a common, I guess, a current practice of service providers is to announce your network aggregates only the most or the longest or the shortest prefix. I'm sorry, to announce the shortest prefix for your network aggregates and only one, and advertise that from a single announcement out of your network. And what that does is that any of the unallocated address space within that block ends up getting dumped on your router, and your router's got to handle that. And so that's what you're seeing here. As you see, the large CIDR block is being announced, and all the garbage packets, to either scans or or backscatter or whatever it is being sent to your router and just tossed. And you can actually analyze that data since you're carrying it on your network anyway. So that's what this is getting at. There's actually. All right, so it wasn't a big deal, that bit of noise that you saw, the backscatter and the random scans and that sort of thing when there were 10 hosts somewhere that someone manually compromised. But with botnets or these zombie networks that have 150,000 nodes and all of them have 10 meg DSL access or something of the sort, becomes a lot more significant. And so to just throw that stuff at a router and fill up a single link in your network or a couple of links in your network and pound your routers, either if they can do unreachables or echo replies, whatever the attack characteristics are, if they can respond to those or handle those in hardware. Well, when the volume goes way up, the overhead on your router and your network and and your service availability are impacted. So one of the things you could do actually is spread out, take some of those unallocated blocks and actually throw them on into your sinkhole, either some or all of them, depending on the volume of traffic and what you want to handle. And so that's what you're seeing here. And basically, I guess, hang on, I'm lost here. These are very slides again. So basically, pull in certain allocated prefixes, certain blocks from the from your aggregate, from the network aggregate or a set of the aggregates, or just your infrastructure address space, and get an idea about what's going on instead of just letting your router dump the traffic or the router become the victim, right? So, but one of the things you got to be aware of, right, is if you're going to announce more specifics for your larger network aggregates, one is you definitely don't want to leak those aggregates out of your network. So put explicit policies in place to handle that, and make sure other things, if you were to announce those prefixes, right, or you decide to change your announcement policies, things like MEDs could be affected. Which I have an issue with MEDs. That's a separate issue, so I won't get into that. But MEDs could be affected based on your announcement policies. The sort of things that that come from central network aggregation and and break other routing stuff. So anyway, okay. So the default route on a customer CPE device, it's the ultimate, I guess, the ultimate vacuum for for garbage, right? So what you're seeing is they have a default route, and they get a lot of garbage, and they don't have anywhere else to send it. They're going to send it to you. So if you analyze that, you can get an idea about what's going on. So, all right. So I've actually talked about some of this, and a lot of it's just there's a lot of volume there, and the the amount of traffic, or what you'd otherwise consider noise. And so to analyze that, and the overhead of it, how you handle that traffic is going to become more and more significant, especially as sinkholes and these botnets grow, and the bandwidth and the capabilities and characteristics grow. So to try and get a handle on that would be a good thing. So. All right, dark IP space, advertising dark IP space and sending it back in your sinkhole. That's what you see here is you can advertise, unallocated infrastructure addresses, unallocated customer blocks, bogon space, RC 1918, whatever it is. It's not a big deal to allocate address space out of your, to announce more specifics of unallocated address space or bogons within your network and just keep them inside your network. So does that make sense? Is everyone with me here? No questions so far? Let's see. Maybe I've lost someone. Everyone following me or just reading email? Okay, that's what I thought. All right. So anyway, let's just hurry up then. No, so what you see here is Anycast sinkholes. What you could do is, because this is a lot of volume, a lot of data, you see, so you put sinkholes in different places in your network and announce the, either the same addresses or different address ranges out of those sinkholes, and you can handle the volume better, and handle things that would otherwise be pummeling a router, and with no visibility, kind of transparently, and you just see a router CPU go up and not know what's actually happening in your network. So if you get to the point where you want to monitor things on a network-wide basis and scale it, to put multiple sinkholes in your network for different prefixes, or to anycast the same prefixes is one of the options you might want to take. So, and this is kind of actually how we've seen some of the service providers we've worked with, Barry and I both, grow their sinkholes. They started with the Unix box, and then they went to distributed, multiple sinkholes in different places in their network for different prefixes, and then to anycasting them so that there's load distribution, because the characteristics of different attacks typically target one or two sources versus an array of sources, or one or two prefixes, should we say. So if you could spread that out over your network, it's a little more robust and gives you a better handle on scaling. So. And that's it. So any questions so far before Barry comes back up? And
okay. So anycasting. Anycasting is a technique that how many people? Well, let's ask this question: how many people are actively using Anycast in their networks today? Let's see. This is one of the things I was wondering, because Anycast has been out for quite a while, and one of the things I realized was there's a lot of different providers out there that don't realize this technique is out there, don't know they can use it as their services. And what's interesting is a couple of big providers, I asked their backbone crews, are you guys Anycast and DNS? And it was like silence. And, it was something that was done like 5 years ago, and it's still there, but they didn't know whether it was running or not. It just works. So Anycast is one of those techniques that really works. It came up with, and we use it with DNS services. It's probably the most common purpose of it. We also use it for advertising our distributed sinkholes, and also for black hole route advertisement. Like, for instance, when you take inside your core and you take your aggregate blocks, you take your entire aggregate space and you want to advertise it out as the prefixes, and you do it inside your core, you never do it on just one of your backbone core routers, you do it maybe on 3 or 4 of them. That's actually Anycasting those big blocks of /19s or /18s or /20s. That's an Anycast technique, because you put on many routers. The Anycast, that's an Anycast technique. And then some guys use Anycast for route convergence. There's some route conversion tricks with it. Now, this thing all came up with sinkholes because there's one big provider. He started and he did a sinkhole, and he just did some dark IP address space, just address space that belonged to him, but more specifics. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Hey, let me go through and read Chris and Brian's document on doing backscatter traceback. Backscatter traceback, a sinkhole is one of the pieces of the 3 pieces of the puzzle with backscatter traceback. And in there they said, Chris and Brian says, oh yeah, we use 96/3. So he took 96/3 and he sticks them on a sinkhole, and he goes like, boom. He says, I DOSed myself because there was so much backscatter on my network. When I put out 96/3, all this traffic just whacked me, and I didn't. It was just overwhelmed by circuits going into my lab. He didn't expect that much traffic coming into it. So he called me, he shut it off, and he called me and says, what can we do? He says, well, why don't we spread it all over your network? We'll just put sinkholes all over the place. And then, because that's actually what's going on right now, because you're dropping packets all over your network with backscatter. They're dropping on routers silently, and they're just packets getting dropped. And if we want to use it with backscatter, then we Anycast it. And then they'll get pulled into different parts of your network instead of just one part of your network. So you don't get you don't end up DOSing yourself. So that's where the using Anycast and Backscatter came from. So in a DNS model, because that's a good reference model, and it's kind of like a similar reference model, we got DNS servers sitting out there in different parts of your network, and we Anycast them. And the idea, in basic Anycast, we basically got, it's the Microsoft, your DNS client. You have two DNS IP addresses. And you take those same two DNS IP addresses, you just stick them on every single one of these servers, and you advertise them in your network. So anytime when somebody tries to resolve one of the addresses, that's in your little, in my case, a Microsoft client, and it tries to resolve one of those DNS addresses, it goes to the closest one to you, right? And you can do this via border gateway protocol. There's a border gateway protocol technique for doing it, and there's an interior gateway protocol techniques for doing Anycast in this way. And some people, even to protect their DNS servers, they take one of the two DNS addresses and put it in the IGP, so it's only reachable inside the network, and the other one on their border gateway protocol that gets advertised out to the world, so it protects their DNS cache servers that way. So this is kind of known. We know how to do this. So when you can do the same sort of thing with sinkholes. In this case, here's a guy, little DNS forwarding is not, that needs to be changed. But basically, you take the customer and he's sending out, he's infected. He's got slammer or something infected. And when you take and try to go through and send him to a sinkhole, he'll go to the closest sinkhole. Instead of to one central sinkhole, he'll go to the closest one. And then as you stretch that across your network, it allows you, to be pushed out to the edge that way. So it distributes the effect. So this is the idea with the Anycast sinkhole. Configuration example for this. This is kind of like configuration example taken from a typical, DNS sort of configuration, where I have servers inside of my network, and these can be, sniffers or other things inside that I want to send traffic over to. And I got two addresses on it. I got one address I use for management. I go to that and configure and log on and do things with it. And the other address is the address I'll use for my sinkhole that I'll advertise everywhere, the same address everywhere. And when I inside my network, in my little sinkhole, I use interior gateway protocol, and then outside I got border gateway protocol advertising my network in this example. So when I go through and trigger and say, okay, say like the top one, say server instance A, when server instance A is my sniffer and I want to send stuff over to my sniffer, then I send out and use that one /32. In this case, it's 10.001/32, and use that one to send it out. So with the sinkholes, designed to pull an attack, and any Anycast placement allows me to go through and place multiple sinkholes across my network without going through and doing major re-architecting of my network. And we kind of know we got several providers who have done this now. That's how they deployed their sinkholes. They started with one and they moved down to an Anycast model because it's very easy for them to find an extra port somewhere in a POP or an extra port in a peering connection and stick a little switch off of it and some extra low, extra routers off the side of it in the rack space to build a sinkhole in that particular colo location. They spread them all over the place and then control it essentially from their security desk where they do the security mitigation work. So, this is just kind of like example of spreading across into like a regional data center sort of approach, or you can push them all the way to the edge, or there's all sorts of flexibility that you can do with the Anycast flexibility. Otherwise, if you have one central one, then you're talk about upgrading circuits and controlling the bandwidth going into the sinkhole and having the concern of having too much of the attack traffic going into your sinkhole and saturating the links going into the sinkhole, because a lot of traffic can build up that way. So I can kind of consider this in the early stages because I got only a few providers who are doing this, but as more people are looking at this, we'll probably see more traction. Hopefully, more people kind of look at this as a valid security tool and deploy them. The ones who had these deployed during Slammer were in a good advantage because they were able to use the sinkholes to say, okay, I got 6 different sinkholes, and hey, the west side of my backbone in the United States has more slammers than my east side of the United States. They are able to look at the different sinkholes and say, in this case, using it to track the turbo worms, they're able to say like, oh wow, they're able to get regionalized data to find out, okay, where should we put most of our help desk support to help our customers to plug up the slammer, and they were able to get some kind of regional view with the sinkholes going on out there. So that's another plus for it. this is another one of those techniques, these tricks that somebody came up to me and said like, hey, here's another technique we found. This is in protecting point-to-point links inside your backbone. So here, in this case, you have a point-to-point link on a backbone, and you got to think about what sort of traffic goes across on a point-to-point link, right? This is like, inside your backbone. So when you think about it and you break it down, border gateway protocol, NTP, things like that, inside your network, you're using loopbacks, right? And so your loopback addresses, right, are not your point-to-point links, right? They're separate. Your ones who use the point-to-point links are things like your interior gateway protocols, things like your link protocols, right? Now those, when they look at it, all they need is to see the connected route because it's directly connected. So they don't actually need a routing protocol to come up and run it because they're sitting adjacent to each other, right? So when it comes to being able to send traffic to these point-to-point links, right? You don't really need the outside world to be able to get to these point-to-point links. I mean, does somebody really need to ping your backbone link? Does somebody really need to ping, some customer outside the planet need to ping your OC182, OC48 links? Not really, when you think about it. But people can trace route. And because they can trace route, these are the addresses that show up. And because they trace route, these addresses show up, people can say, here's intelligence for me to have a target. If I want to go after and attack a router, I do a couple of trace routes to a provider, and I get enough addresses on the point-to-point links that I can go out there and whack the routers. So to protect them in the past, people have used different things to protect these infrastructure point-to-point links. People have used ACLs in the past. Some people have tried using RFC 1918, as an example, but you have problems with reflection attacks with it, which I'll talk about what a reflection attack is. So one idea that one of the guys came out with says, hey, they had this. What happened was a scenario where one of the customers was attacked. So they jumped in to help their customer out, and then the attacker shifted the attack off of the customer and attacked the routers that supported the customer. So the attack target shifted from the customer to the service provider's routers to hit the service provider's routers. And so here they're going, okay, what are we going to do now on these backbone links to protect it? And what they did is they threw in a sinkhole, and they basically took all the infrastructure blocks, all the point-to-point link addresses inside the network, and they advertised off the sinkhole. And what that did is the attack that was going after one of their routers, point-to-point links, all went down into the sinkhole. All right, so it shoved it down into the sinkhole. So it was a way for them to protect their point-to-point links that way. All right. So in this case, give an example here. It's not. The point here is it's not a perfect sort of solution because there are links that, for instance, when I go, say like in this case, the top attack flow, I'm going after 198.0.22, which is that first link, that first router in. So that first router in there, this technique wouldn't protect that one because router A, which is my border router, the parent router, has a connected prefix going to that, right? But if the second one, the one at the bottom, which is 198.0.2.5, that's inside, that's more than 2 hops into my network inside my backbone, anything I try to send beyond there would go down into the sinkhole. So like a lot of security solutions, it's not a perfect solution, but it is a tool. It's a technique that you can turn on. So it's one of those things that if you plan for it, you can go through and just set up a little rule and have all your infrastructure addresses handy that you can go through and inject them if you want to. So what this one provider does is they have their sinkhole ready to turn on. They don't have it turned on all the time, but they have it ready to turn on, and they know exactly all their addresses. And so if this situation happens again, they can easily go on the box, activate the little rule they have prepared, and be able to use this technique to protect some of their infrastructure addresses. All right, so this is kind of like traffic getting shut down into the sinkhole instead of being sent off into one of the point-to-point addresses. Now, another thing is, some people say, well, RFC 1918 addresses, right? Oh, I use RFC 1918 addresses, but and some people would come and say, yeah, but RFC 1918 addresses as point-to-point infrastructure addresses, which RFC, says you shouldn't use in the public internet space. But people say, oh, give me more security because people can't attack me then. But then nobody ever mentions to them, well, you can do a reflection attack. And a reflection attack is where I send in addresses which are basically RFC 1918 addresses. It's spoofed in my source addresses. And then I hit customers who have access to my network. And then what happens is my customers then reply to my infrastructure addresses, which are RFC 1918 addresses. So you get all this backscatter junk and this reply, this reflection, that's called a reflection, that's targeted at a particular interface. So in this case, my reflection target is on router B, and I use that as a reflection target. And so again, here, this is one of those things where if you have a black hole, the infrastructure, black hole in the infrastructure addresses is a technique that you can use to mitigate if this sort of thing happens with these sort of reflection sort of attacks. And this is especially coming true as people starting to also look at, putting ACLs on the edge. When you put ACLs on the edge, protect your infrastructure blocks, you got to not only stop the destination address, but you also got to do the anti-spoof, the source address. So you got to have an ACL that's constructed just like an enterprise ACL, where you don't allow any source address to equals my own block, my infrastructure blocks, and no destination address going into my infrastructure blocks unless it's explicitly permitted, like an EBGP peering connection. So you got to do both. Some providers I was talking to were just doing one; they were just doing destination. I said, but you got to do both, otherwise you're vulnerable to these sort of reflection attacks out there. Now, while all this is building up to, and for this tutorial, and we'll probably get over it sooner or quick unless the people have a lot of questions on it, is preparing for the next turbo one. Usually we do these in the fall nanog, but we were asked to maybe kind of do this time as kind of like preparing for the next turbo one. Now, we all know we got hit with this guy, with Slammer. And as we talked about the last nanog when we did the post-mortem on it, thank goodness we had started working on ways of talking to each other, ISP to ISP, because it was ISPs who saw this thing first, and because we had NSPsec and a couple other tools out there to talk to each other, we were able to quickly figure out how to contain it and through the containment filters up to stop it. Otherwise, this thing would have just been a real nightmare. It was pretty bad, but it was a real nightmare. Once you contain a worm, right, kind of like there's 3 stages of worm mitigation. Stage 1 is identifying what's going on. Stage 2 is containing it. It's kind of like SARS out in Asia. You got to contain it. You got to isolate it. You got to section it off in this part of the network. And then the third thing, you got to actually go out there and cure it. You got to fix it. Well, what happened with Slammer is, luckily we had people out there that can identify it quick, and we figured out a containment quick. But then what happened is it took quite a while to start clearing up the problem. And the ones who were able to clear it fast were the people out there with sinkholes. Because one of the things that a sinkhole would do is a sinkhole will give you a statistic from the backscatter off the worm, or the scans off the worm. You get 2 sort of things got for there. You're getting the worm actually hitting you, because these worms go out there and start scanning, the entire internet space. And so if you have some bogon space and some dark IP space on your sinkhole, guess what? Your sinkhole is going to pick that up. And it's going to say, hey, I got all these scans going on here. What's going on? Somebody's scanning me here. Let's identify this. Let's fire at my sniffer and kind of take a packet capture and say, oh, this is a worm here. And the other thing you're going to get out of it is the backscatter from all the other failed attempts across your network. So you're going to get 2 sorts of data in there going into your sinkhole with it. And what you get out of this out of your sinkhole is who's infected. Because, you got a computer infected, and the computer's not trying to hide the fact that, hey, I'm infected. I'm trying to infect you. It's like Code Red, Ninja, Slammer, all. You can easily use the sinkholes that go back and say, these are my infected hosts. And this is the 3rd stage of containing the worm, which is you actually got to clean it up, right? And the providers that had these in their networks were able to go through and we contained it, and then they were out there to go out there and get their customers fixed because they had these sinkholes in place. Other guys had to go out there and build the sinkholes, while Slammer was going on, so they can start identifying who's infected and clean them up afterwards. In this case, this is actually emulating, what happens in Cisco. Cisco, we got sinkholes that we know our providers, all of our upstream providers that Cisco uses have sinkholes deployed, so we know that the providers can use it. And then inside our DMZ area, we got one, and that's the most active one. That's the one that we use all the time. because it's in the DMZ area. You know, it's in between, you know, firewall layers, right? And then inside Cisco's corporate network, we got sinkholes deployed all over across the entire global corporate IT network. Those mainly sit around most of the time idle, and every now and then, especially, we'll get lab servers pop up with like code red and NIMD infections. They get about 2 or 3 code red and NIMD infections a month that pop up, and they're able to spot them right away. The sinkholes just pick them right up and say, okay, and they're able to go down and they go over to the lab and they disconnect the lab from, you know, and then they call up the lab admin and say, okay, one of your machines is infected, you know, let's plug it up, let's fix it, let's get it patched, sort of thing. And so you're able to spot these inside the corporate network quite effectively. So the sinkhole concept is not just something that you can do in an ISP backbone scenario, but inside in a service provider's own service infrastructure, corporate infrastructure, your customers in an enterprise scenario. It's a tool out there that's good for the worm mitigation. So in summary, the nature of the threat. In Slammer's case, you know, the 30 minutes is thrown out. It was more like, you know, 10-15 minutes when you look at some of the studies of the spread of the infection vector. When you got turbo worms that go out and spread that fast, you can't wait until the worm happens to go and build these tools. And since these tools are not rocket science, right? None of the things here is hard, right? And they're not expensive because, you know, as I said, we got guys who just took a spare workstation, loaded up Zebra and TCP dump on it, and they had their sinkhole, right? So they're not expensive to do. And with Anycast deployment, you don't have to rebuild your network to deploy on. All right, so it's not like something you can say, well, all these different excuses why you don't deploy them. But you can't wait until the next turbo worm happens to deploy them. It's something that you got to do now to prepare for the next turbo worm. Now we know the next turbo worm is going to happen. We don't know when. We don't know what the attack vector is going to be and the infection vector is going to be for the next turbo worm. But we know it's going to happen. We also know because, you know, it was, you know, I was knocking my head on the table when we had last NANOG, and we had people up here on stage saying, here is all the errors they made in the Slammer, you know, scan rate. You know, and say like, you know, Slammer was fast, but you know, they made all these computational errors, and they could have been faster. You know, and here's the math of how they could have been faster. You know, and you see, you know, people do that sort of analysis, which is very useful analysis. But then somebody who's probably planning these next sort of worms is looking at that. You know, get it from 10-minute global spread to like a 5-minute global spread. Right. So the key thing here is be prepared, and that's what this talk is about for that. So, and on here, we'd like to, you know, thank some of the contributors on here. Some of the people who contributed this over time. You know, Tim Dallas, Chris Morrow, Bill Upper, Roland Dobbins, who runs our Cisco DMZ, and many other guys helped Danny and I put this together. And now we're open for questions, comments. Questions and comments. War stories. Anybody who's had a sinkhole, who's found some interesting uses for it, we have not expressed. Okay, well, if there's nothing out there, Danny and I will be up here for anybody who wants to come up to the stage, because a lot of times in security, nobody wants to get up and talk security when it's being taped to be replayed on the internet. So we will close up, and we'll be here, and then we'll hopefully see everybody tonight at the security BOF. And those of you who don't know about the security BOF, that's our kind of like a regular meeting where we're trying to take one piece at a time and do more and more security on the internet and working with each other. And so we'll be talking some more what's going on with NSPsec. If you don't know what NSPsec is, come to security BOF and find out. Okay, thank you.